Reflecting on last week's conversation, um, I'm delighted with the degree to which your discussion integrates the readings and the media and one another's ideas, um, and the way that you have entered into very thoughtful exchange, considering and expanding on one another's points. Um, and related to that, the community wall postings are awesome. So between the two of them, there is so much opportunity for everyone to um, learn about these contexts in greater depth. So I'm delighted by what you all have contributed to a very stimulating week. It's interesting, isn't it, that as some of you point out, the explanations for mental illness have been driven by historical trends, cycles of biological and spiritual, economic and political or judicial factors. It's odd, isn't it? And similarly, interventions have been driven by the same factors, because as we know, assessment leads directly to intervention. And so people with mental illnesses have been really pawns in the contextual game of uh, different trends that societies have have gone through. One thing that has been consistent until the 1980s is the absence of the voice or the influence of consumers, both in how they're assessed and how they're treated. And that brings us to this week's conversation, going deeper into issues of stigma and stereotypes and prejudice. It's interesting, isn't it, as some pointed out, that even with this burgeoning knowledge in neuroscience that has been going on in the last 20 years, and the ever-increasing knowledge about evidence-based practices, somehow stigma seems to be intransigent. As some of you also pointed out, there continues to be so much stigma related to mental illness that no matter what the explanations are, whether they're biological or spiritual or economic or political or judicial, i.e. the mentally ill person is a criminal, no matter what the explanations are, people with mental illnesses are marginalized by societies. Certainly Western societies, as one of you pointed out, in non-Western societies, there has sometimes been a recognition that people who, from the Western point of view, would be termed mentally ill are valued and treasured for their alternative worldview in those contexts. But thinking about and preparing for our continuing conversation on stigma and stereotypes and prejudice, why is it, do you think, that even in advances in brain science and evidence-based practices, why is it that those things have not significantly reduced stigma? Um, I, as an example, um, I want to tell you about an exercise that I sometimes do in class. I ask people to write down names of population groups all around the perimeter of the class, and then to list all the stereotypes that they're aware of related to that group. And you can imagine it's a rather uncomfortable thing for people to do, but once they get going, boy, these stereotypes just flow out of them. And then I ask, other than what's written here on the board, what do you know about people in these different social identity groups? And it turns out that other than those stereotypes, people know very little, because those, when we're unfamiliar with any person from any social identity group, the stereotypes actually make up our model through which we, with that we use to view any member of that group. It becomes our lens, and that is then informed by all those stereotypes. One thing that I'd like to suggest is the idea that the only remedy for that pattern continuing is relationship. Because in the absence of meaningful personal experience and relationship, I don't think it is really possible to understand people with different social identity groups, and you will be developing relationships with people across the spectrum of social identity groups, and you'll find that every one of those relationships informs your understanding. And so I look forward to this week's conversation and your thoughts, continuing thoughts about stigma. So we're off to a great start, and I look forward to our ongoing conversation.